is happening now, and we're entering these times now. And what we try to do, the people who are trying to sort of go around, like Ian Crane, myself, David Icke, many, many people, is wake people up to the fact that this is happening now, because there is still a chance that we could fashion a different world.
Yes.
But if we don't stop heading for the direction we're currently heading in, it's going to be very hard to come back. So I think raising awareness now that we still have a chance to create something which is far less draconian, I think is extremely important, and that's why it's very important now to be looking at these kinds of things.
Absolutely, and it seems to be also at the same time as many people are waking up to this reality. On another level, some people also seem to go in the opposite direction of being dumbed down, and that, to me at least, is a kind of signal why the agenda is being openly discussed, if you will, as well. These two seem to run hand in hand, as it were, and it almost seems to be a split, if you will. Those people who really are informed, those who put time into studying the environment that they're in, the political system that they're in, and where we're heading. And at the other end, you have the rest of the gang that seems to be more interested in, entertainment and not talking about these things. Do you think that this is something that needs to be overcome as well in that sense, or do you feel that this it's a lost cause to try to convert these people over to the other side, if you know what I mean?
I don't think anybody's ever a lost cause. I think part of the problem that we have at the moment is that people are easily distracted. And, of course, if you just turn on the television and you look at what's pumping out, we are looking at a huge world of distraction, and people are very quickly misled into being fascinated with trivia. And as you say, that term dumbed down. But, and I think here is the hopeful sign, what I find is when you actually offer people something a little bit more than that, if you talk to them about what's going on and you try to expose them to the reality that maybe somebody is actually deliberately trying to suck them away from using their brains, it's actually quite encouraging how quickly people wake up, and you will see them nod and they will begin to agree and say, actually that's exactly what I think, but I just haven't been able to really do anything about it. And once you have that awareness, once you wake up to the fact that what your television in the corner of the room is selling you is a version of reality that isn't really reality, once you realize that the news stories that are washing into you may be trying to put you in a state of fear rather than actually inform you, once you wake up to that, you can begin to discern more clearly what it is that's being pushed in your direction. And people then are not under its control. It's almost like waking up from hypnosis. But I think that the danger is that people get too used to it and just too used to, watching several hours of television a night, eating junk food, not eating things that are going to give them healthy minds, never mind healthy bodies. I think we now all need to take responsibility for what we put into our minds and what we put into our bodies. And there's plenty of conspiracy theorists out there who believe that there is an ongoing program to actually, if you like, disenfranchise ourselves from our spirits, from our bodies, by feeding us junk, by putting, deadly additives and sweeteners into food that we don't need, that we don't process properly. This is where you realize that we need to wake up and therefore take that responsibility back. But people can, and I definitely don't think in any way are we looking at a lost cause. And in fact, quite the opposite. I think as we get towards 2012, and Helen Sewell touched on this in an astrological broadcast with you a few weeks ago.
Yes.
We're going to see a lot more people actually stand up and say, hang on a minute, we don't like what's going on here. We cannot sit still for this. We will actually see, I think, more reaction rather than less. So the people at the moment that may be seeming a little bit too slow to act, I think once they become aware that maybe somebody's trying to lead them in a bad direction, I think you're going to see more action than maybe we expect. And I think, therefore, we should take some heart to that. I think what the task is at the moment, though, is making sure that the reaction, the response, is not a negative one, is not a violent one, but is something that can actually be put to good use, that is going to create a more positive world. And, I think very much at the moment there is this horrible feeling that we're almost being pushed into rioting, into taking to the streets, because, of course, when people do that, that's when the powers that be can justify more controls in the name of protecting us from violence. And I think people should not respond in any way with that kind of mob mentality. I think that's a big, big mistake. So I think what we need to be trying to sort of create here is sort of a revolution of mind and spirit rather than revolution, because I think if we go into the more negative way of responding, I think that's when we're almost playing into the hands of some of the powers that would seemingly like us to do that. And I think we need to be very careful.
Well, that's right, and I'm thinking about the most recent thing now. We can see the agenda of fear is being played out again. This card, this is constantly a theme, of course, in the background, but they choose to put this in front of our eyes now and then. This climate of fear. I'm thinking of the recent swine flu scare that's going on right now. I don't know if you follow it at all, but I mean, again, they're pushing this story now again. We had the SARS scares a couple of years ago, but that didn't pan out, but here here they go again, and there seems to be, this is about, on one level then, pushing the vaccinations, which again ties back to what you talked about in regards to what we put into our bodies and so forth.
Yes.
And also then, of course, the Tamiflu sales, and as an economic engine, if you will, to all of this as well, right?
Well, I mean, yes, I do think it's very interesting that now we have, the swine flu scare going on. And again, what it seems to be doing is creating a climate of extreme fear. And of course, when we are frightened, we give in more to policies which are allegedly there to protect us, but in fact what they do is take away freedom, take away liberty. And I think we need to absolutely step out of the fear mentality. I mean, if you actually look at the reality of it, now the deaths that have occurred in Mexico as a result, we are told, of this flu, now they're very, very unfortunate. It seems that the strain, if these reports are true, which is going around the rest of the world, is actually nowhere near as strong. And perhaps we need to look at why those deaths in Mexico occurred. Maybe these people did not have access to the same quality of life. Maybe they didn't have clean water. I don't know what the situation is. But it's interesting to note that although nobody as yet seems to be dying in those kinds of numbers, shall we say, in other countries, nonetheless, the fear that is being pumped out is that we could all be dead tomorrow. And yet there's actually no evidence of that.
No.
The story is being exaggerated out of proportion to make you think that you've got to rush and, yes, get your dose of Tamiflu. And, of course, that then worries a lot of people because you look at some of the names behind the companies that are pushing the flu sort of remedies and the flu vaccines. And, of course, a lot of these turn out to be the same kind of people who seem to be behind a lot of the, shall we say, darker political ventures that, of course, the conspiracy world has been discussing for many years. So this is where you think, well, hang on, are we being hoodwinked here? Are we queuing up for vaccinations that we don't need? It obviously creates massive wealth for certain pharmaceutical companies. And this is not to say that they don't also do good, but we need to ask questions about each thing that comes up. Do we need this? What would be the benefit to somebody who didn't have our best interests at heart of us all fearing a huge flu pandemic? So I think before this gets out of hand, people really need to get it back into perspective and consider what some of the other motives might be.
Exactly. And again, as you mentioned, some of these companies, Baxter is one of them being behind, discussions are being made with WHO, I think, World Health Organization, to develop some kind of vaccine against this. But again, Baxter has been accused before of actually putting live avian flu virus in their vaccines and stuff like this, sent out to 18 different countries. And this is just rolling on and on and on. And it's out there in the open. And in one way, it feels like people who don't take responsibility and read up on these things, that they're in one sense willingly are going along with this. So on one level, they're actually showing you what they're doing all the time, in one sense, but people who don't follow up on this, they just walk into the jaws of these people that are giving them the vaccines and offer them the remedies for the diseases that in many cases seems to be that they are behind to begin with,
Well, I mean, one of the areas that I explore in the book, which will be shocking to people new to it, and I'm very aware of this, I mean, the kind of people like ourselves who perhaps discuss this kind of thing fairly often, we get used to it. We don't realize how shocking it is to those on the outside of this who've never heard of the theory that maybe there are people that actually would like to wipe out a fair size of the population.
Yeah.
So, of course, this is very shocking when you come to this idea, but there are many people that believe there is an active program to reduce the global population. Now, overpopulation may be a problem, but obviously somebody else deciding on your behalf who's going to live and who isn't is not really a very good solution. And but it is amazing how many people are willing to believe that there might well be powers at work of people who would, yes, perhaps introduce something more dubious into something which allegedly is there to prevent us getting ill, but actually it might be quite the opposite. I don't know what the truth of these things are, but what I think it does reveal is how little faith we now have in those who are pulling the strings.
Yes.
And to me, it's as much that being revealed as to whether there's any truth to it or not that needs serious action, because there is now so much pessimism that, well, maybe these people that we vote into power and the ones we don't vote into power and yet still seem to have great power over us, well, maybe they don't have our best interests at heart. And that's what the banking crisis has really made people wake up to. And, of course, you know, the loss of faith in authorities is huge. And the danger with that comes where you're almost looking at a kind of a new anarchy, because if you're dealing with people that we cannot respect or trust, there is no way that that kind of power structure can exist for long without there being more extreme methods put into place to keep them in control.
Well, exactly. People
and I
are
think
going to...
this is an issue we really do need to look at. But, you know, at the same time, so many of the decisions that seem to be made and the way they are made and the way, certainly in England, people seem to behave when you see them in the House of Commons all screaming at each other and laughing and joking, these are not people you can respect. And because of that, it's certainly younger people are just turning away from it, saying, well, these people are not the answer. But it also then gives, you know, birth to this deep streak of pessimism that, well, maybe these people are so appalling, they would even try to kill us all. And I think it's very, very sad that that's kind of where we've got to, that we're even willing to be talking about this kind of thing, whatever the ultimate truth of it is.
Absolutely. And I want to ask you a little bit more here later on, or perhaps in hour two, as we continue about this this idea of depopulation, what the reason for that might be, and what if so, what they're afraid of, or why the human being needs to be controlled. And on one level, I also see that people will, as you said, demand this control in one sense as a kind of response to all the chaos that we see. But before we do that, I want to spend the last 10 minutes or so that we have in this segment, Andy, to talk a little bit more about your speech at the AV2 conference. You will go into this, it's called The Era of Turmoil and the Energy of Hope, and this is, of course, a little bit what we have been talking about already here, but will you focus a little bit more on Barack Obama and what happened there and what he kind of represents? Is that right?
Of course. Well, I mean, you know, one of the things that I'm very keen to do, and this is very true of the book, is to not leave people feeling paranoid and disenfranchised and frightened, because I think we need the opposite. I think there's a lot of reason to hope and a lot of optimism. In fact, unlikely though it may seem with all the issues we're discussing, but there is a lot of optimism that a lot of these things could be put right. We have an opportunity to do that. And what I think was very, very important with the election of Barack Obama was not the man himself, because as you will doubtless know, and many listeners will know, a lot of people feel that he is a continuation of the old agenda.
Yes.
Certainly a lot of the people in the background who put him into power are the same old faces that were there in the Bush years. And some of the people Obama has appointed to power are some of the same old faces. Now, this obviously is cause for concern. Now, whether or not that reveals anything of the man himself, or whether he is just having to go along with, other programs in the hope that he can change it from within, well, we can't say that yet. I know people like Alex Jones,